All right. Well, this week we're up with vaYiqra, which Leviticus for English speakers, chapter 24, verse 18. So, as is my custom, I'm going to back up to 17 and read my translation, say a few things, and move on. So, before I do, I want to remind you of something that led us to verse 17. I think it's from verse 16. But we were talking about when it said the Bible says that somebody will be put to death. It says mot yumat yamut. The way yamut's probably more common, but that's die. He die, uh, and so because in Hebrew most of the time, if we are essentially putting an exclamation point behind something, if we're trying to make it more important, we say the same word twice. And to a Jew, saying mot, yumat, or yamut, that's just saying moot, moot. You're saying it twice, right? And generally, not always, but generally, we'll say the first word in singular, and the second time we'll say it in plural, which makes it sound different. We never say, just in this case, the word death or die is moot. So we don't say moot, moot. We'll say mot, yamut. So I wanted, so they say, let's die the death, he shall surely die. They like to use surely, because they're trying to intensify it in some way. They don't want to say die, he die, or die, she die, or whatever. They don't want to say it that way in English. So they say, surely they will die. So if you're looking at Genesis chapter 2, verse 17, there toward the end of the verse, it says, for in the day, so that very day, in that same day, is what they mean by in the day, that you eat from it. Now, if you back up a little bit, you'll know what they're talking about is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. In the day, now he's talking to Adam v'Chava, Adam and Eve, as they're called in the English Bibles. In that day that you eat from that tree, mot tamut. So there's mixed company here. There's a male and a female, if you will. Generally, everything in the Bible is written in the masculine, right? The only time you don't see that is when it's mixed company. Then it tends to be written in the feminine. So instead of mot yamut, it becomes mot tamut. But it's exactly the same thing. It's just that this is feminine because there's a woman there. Die, you shall die. Very literally. Genesis chapter 2, verse 17. So, what do? They decide to eat from that fruit. Really? Would you do that? If somebody said, hey, in the day that you take this cyanide pill, you're going to die. You're going to stop breathing. You're going to become worm food. It's over for you. Would you eat from that tree? Or would you take that pill? Just asking. And when we get to chapter 3, verse 23, it says, and Yahweh God sent them from the Garden of Eden. I guess that's so that they could go dig the holes so that they could, drop the little bodies in there and die, and then somebody else maybe come by and put the dirt over them. Because they were going to die that day. Yahweh God sent them from the Garden of Eden. In the next verse, in Genesis 3:24, it says, God drove them out. Drove them out. Intensifies the word from send to drive, right? Drove them out. Did they die? Were they put in the ground and dirt thrown over their dead bodies? Were they stoned to death? Were they struck with lightning? Did fireballs come from the sky? And no, they lived until they were very old. That's what the Bible says. In fact, after they died, they had kids. Remember that? Boys and girls. Those kids all got married and started having grandkids and whatnot and what have you. How come they didn't die? They were surely going to die. So God told the people that they would die if they ate from that particular tree. But he did not kill them. In fact, they didn't die, like I said, till they were old. And now we're supposed to believe that the God who told the people in the day that you eat that tree, you're going to die, that God who did not kill those people wants his children to kill other people for lesser offenses. Because yes, murdering another human being is a lesser offense than essentially murdering the whole human race. Think about it. So what happened? In the day that they ate that, God drove them out of his presence. That's die. You shall die. All right, so what am I doing? Let me go back over here to where I'm supposed to be. So, verse 17 from last week. And if a man kills, you're probably looking at some English translation, it'll say if he strikes a soul. But it's to kill somebody, because that soul's going to die, right? In our sense of the word, no more breathing, worm dirt, that kind of die. If he kills any human, he dies. He dies. Die, he dies. Mot, yamut. Same words, only in the masculine, because this whole thing's written in the masculine. It's not mixed company. So, same thing. This guy is supposed to die. Do we know what die is at this point? Dying the death. It's to be driven out of the presence of God. Okay, let me get on. Let's start on 18. Now it says, and this is very literal English, I mean very almost incomprehensible, it's so literal English. And strike soul livestock, he peace they will, soul under soul. So you're being told that if you kill somebody, you're going to be driven out of the camp. Now it's saying, here's what happens if you kill someone else's livestock. It's not yours. If you're killing your own livestock, you're slaughtering it, getting ready to eat it, right? So we start off with mache. It's the same word, strike, that would harm somebody to the point that they die. This one is intensified. It's called hofal, which is the passive of he feel, but it's to kill, to slay. They're dead. And what's it say after that? Nefesh. So they're using the word soul of what are going to turn out to be animals. That does not mean that animals have a soul. They use the word nefesh the way we use the word people. How many souls were on board the plane when it went down? They still say things like that about planes and ships. How many souls were on the ship when it went down? Maybe not so much these days, but they certainly spoke that way when I was growing up. So anyway, your next word is behemoth. Livestock, it's not so much livestock as it's like cattle. Which would have included ox. Ox and cows, kind of the same thing. In Hebrew, an ox and a cow really is the same animal. And in Hebrew, a sheep and a goat is the same animal. Do they have separate words? Yeah, they do. Keves for sheep. What's that? Oh, man, it just jumped out of my head. Something like I can't even think of the word for goat. Anyway, they do have separate words for the two things, but technically they're the same animal as far as Hebrew is concerned. Not technically, but literally, they are the same animal. In fact, they called sheep and goats small cows. Anyway, so if you have struck this animal and it's dead, and it's not yours, you need to understand that for sure. Then it uses the root word shalom. It says, yeah, shalemena, but that's shalom, right? So it's he peace, they will. So in other words, the way we would say it, that person will make peace with them. The person, obviously, who the animal belongs to. So you're going to make peace with that person. And then it says nefesh. So we're speaking of the soul of something. The next word is tachat, which generally means under, the lower part, below, underneath something. It also is in place of, instead of. So you've killed somebody's, let's just say, cow. Even if you didn't mean to, whatever, you killed their cow. So now, in place of that cow, you have to give them nefesh, because it's saying soul under soul. So you have to give a cow for a cow, a goat for a goat, a pigeon for a pigeon, whatever. You have to replace it. So we're running into the idiom world here. But my translation, because remember, this is a continuation of the last verse. This is actually the rest of that verse or more of that verse. So the person has struck this animal, and it says, and kills an animal, he will pay for it. To make peace is to pay for it. He will pay for it. A life, a soul, a life for a life, right? But it says a soul under a soul, which means a life to replace a life. But again, they have to be the same thing. You can't go kill somebody's cow and give them a pigeon, right? Because that's why they're using the word soul, nefesh. It's got to be the same thing. If you kill a cow, you can't give them a calf. Well, they might go for that if your calf is high quality and they weren't in need of that slaughtering that cow that year. Perhaps they would go for that. But because there are circumstances where that calf could be worth more to them in the long run, and maybe that's all you have, then that they may accept your offer there. But essentially, it's supposed to be, I have a grown cow, it's ready for slaughter, and you backed up with your buggy there and knocked it off the cliff and killed it. So now you have to replace it. So it's difficult to translate the meaning of this verse without adding more words. You just can't really do it. However, it should be understood that a fair amount of money can be paid instead of an actual replacement. The replacement must be of equal or greater value. If a person kills $1 million racehorse, he cannot attempt to replace it with a horse on its way to the glue factory. You with me? Okay, verse 19. Very little English. And man, for he give defect with neighbor he, as that did so he do to he. Well, if you just think about those words, you might can figure it out. So we start off with ve'ish. So it's and man. In English, we would translate that and a man. We don't need a in Hebrew. We do in English. So it's and man. This is key, which can be if, before, because. It can be a few other things, but generally it's going to be one of those three. The way the sentence lays itself out, we'll know if it's interrogatory. In other words, if we translate it if, or if it's because because mean the same thing. Then we have yiten. So if he give or because he give, because give is your word to give, to cause to receive, to put into the hand of somebody else. You're giving something to someone. I mean, you can give a person a law, right? If you're the lawmaker, you can give a law, and that would be to impose something on someone else, to impose a fine for breaking this law that you wrote. You know what I'm saying? So there is a negative side of that as well. Generally, to give is, oh, great, you gave me, $5, great, thanks. But it can also be to give you something you don't want. Anyway, then we have mum, not mum, but mum. M-U-M would be pronounced mum because it's mem, vav, mem. Well, that's a defect, a spot, a blemish, a stain. What are we talking about? Well, we're saying that if you harm somebody such that you've left maybe a mark, maybe a scratch, maybe a cut, maybe you've poked their eye out, maybe you cut their nose off. I mean, this is defect, right? It's a defect. Then it's ba'amito. We need to talk about this because in your English book, it's going to say neighbor. And most people don't know what a neighbor is. He ain't heavy. That's he's my brother. Yeah, he's heavy, weighs 220 pounds. Holy cow. See, because the Western people think they're way smarter than God. And so where this word comes from, the Hebrew word which means people, your people. What does that mean? Well, essentially it means your race. Like as in the Jewish race, because this book was written by Jews, to Jews, for Jews, and no one but the Jews. Are we clear on that? That's what a neighbor is. Doesn't have anything to do necessarily with the person who lives next door to you or some guy hitchhiking down the road, for sure. Nothing. It has to do with the group to which you belong. So then it says ka'asher, which just asher is that, T-H-A-T, or which, W-H-I-C-H, so not the one on the broom with the funny hat. The that which I speak of. Okay, that, W-H-I-C-H. which is not how you spell the other one, but some people don't know. Anyway, asa. So according to that which was done. So you see where we're going at this point, I hope. It's going to start to clear it up. So we have the word ken, which in this case is so, thus, that sort of thing. So as it was done, what you did to that other person to cause some sort of defect, for those of you who know the Christian Bible, when they come to get Yeshua in the garden, one of the stories says that Capa pulled out his sword and he sliced off the ear of one of the servants that came to get him. And that's a defect, right? Now he's defective. And if he happens to be the servant of the high priest, he'll never get to serve as that in that position ever again. Well, lucky for him, Yeshua didn't even reach down and pick up the ear that was cut off. He just reached up and touched him, and he had a new ear. So that's a pretty cool story. But you get that Capa did exactly what we're talking about here. He caused a deformation because the guy had an ear, now he doesn't. So he's deformed him from that which he should look like or should be like, or however you want to look at that. So that which was that he did to that guy is now kind of supposed to happen to him. So it's lo to him. That sound alike word. It's not the negative. It's just lamed, vav, lo. I've often wondered if in the olden days, if they said leo instead of lo. I think there's a possibility of that. So anyway, my translation, and if a man imposes a disfigurement to his amit, to his peoples, because that's what it is people in plural, his peoples, his neighbor in English, that which he has done shall be done to him. That kind of sounds like if Capa cut that man's ear off and Yeshua wasn't there to fix him up, then should Capa have had his ear cut off? Well, let's see. He died doesn't mean you kill him. At least not yet. I think there comes a time when that'll change, and we might be getting close. But at this point, we don't actually know. Does this really mean that if he chops this dude's ear off, oh my good gosh almighty, what just happened? Yeah, I can't get to it here. Well, I opened up some kind of code window without even knowing I was doing it. So at this point, we really can't be sure. Is it because just going by this one verse, standing out all by itself, it's saying that when Capa cut that man's ear off, again, had Yeshua not fixed the guy, Capa would have had to have his ear cut off. Now, we don't know for sure at this point if that's what's being said, but it is a possibility. And again, because God did not kill Adam v'Chava, Adam and Eve in the garden and just drove them out from his presence, you would think, since this is a lesser crime here, that maybe that's not what's going on. But we got to leave it open because there is no clarity from this one verse. Now, verse 20, in very literal English, damage under damage, eye under eye, tooth under tooth, as that he give defect in man, so he establish in he. This may actually change everything we ever thought we knew, right? So we start off with shever, which is damage. It's so, cutting off the ear, knocking guy's nose off somehow, you got his eye poked out or whatever damage that was done, and it says tahat. Remember, that's that word under, but it's also in place of, which is why you could say Kepa maybe was supposed to get his ear cut off, because in place of that guy's loss, well, you really can't do that, can you? What good would it have done to cut Kepa's ear off? You can't. It's not like you could sew it on the other guy, at least maybe nowadays, but not then for sure. Although that'd be a heck of a deterrent if you knew that if you cut some guy's ear off, they were going to cut yours off and sew it back on the other guy. But that's that same word, right? That to replace. Then it says shaver, to replace the damage. So the damage that was done must be that damage, same damage to replace that damage is literally what we have so far. So then it goes ayin, that's your eyeballs, ayin, tachat. So I in place, ayin. And eye for an eye is how they say it in English generally, which is a pretty good translation. That's really what's being said. You somehow knock some guy's eye out, and this is quite literally saying your eye is to be knocked out. Of course, this is not a literal language, so let's not jump to conclusions here. Then it says shen. Well, that's your tooth, those things you eat with. Tachat shen, so a tooth for a tooth. We have eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Well, we should know by now, those have been used for the idiom, the punishment will fit the crime, right? Because we've already had that, and it's exactly what that meant. The punishment will fit the crime. Those are the idioms. Eye for eye, tooth for tooth. Then it says ka'asher, as that yitin, as this, so such that was given out, mum, that the same defect that this person suffered by Adam, in the man, that this man suffered, can, that's so, S-O, yitin, so will be given, bo, which is be-o, perhaps, in him, or to him, would make more sense to us in English. So let's back up a little bit. Verse 19 says, and if a man imposes a disfigurement to his meat, to his peoples, that which he has done shall be done to him. And then verse 20, we could say the punishment should fit the crime. The punishment should fit the crime. The punishment should fit the crime. Or we could say, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and what was the other one? I didn't write that down. Whatever the third one was. And then it ends up with, to the same degree that he imposed a disfigurement, it shall be done to him. So as I was just kind of getting on there, normally an eye for an eye is used idiomatically to mean that the punishment should fit the crime. No one is supposed to poke anybody's eye out. That's actually forbidden by God's law. However, when it comes to someone purposely causing someone who lives close to him, somebody that's part of his people or his immediate family, or, if you're Jewish and you've done this to another Jew, Italian, you did it to another Italian, an American, you did it to another American, and that puts a lot of different bloodlines in there. So it's a group that has some commonality. Then and only then is an eye actually supposed to be poked out. That's a possibility. I'm not saying that's definitely what it means, but there's a good possibility that it is literally telling us that if you cause somebody in your group somebody of your race, your nationality, to lose an eye, then you should lose an eye. If you cause them to lose an ear, you should lose an ear. If you cause whatever it is, that should be done to you. Unless this stuff should be applied idiomatically. I'm holding out on that and not just jumping straight to the meaning of the idiom, because one of these verses has a certain word in it that it gives me pause as to whether it meant idiomatic or literal. Now, I've never seen it mean literal before, but I'm going to I just want to, put it out there. Maybe not. Maybe yes. Okay. In Shemot 21:24, it says, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Well, it says eye under eye, tooth under tooth, foot under foot. And in all of those cases, it literally meant the punishment should fit the crime. So most likely, the same thing's happening here. I just realized it's the word given that bothers me. The same thing he gave, he should be given. That kind of takes it out of that realm of idiom. So let's just keep that in the back of our minds. We may not figure this out for another chapter or two, and maybe it'll hit us in the next verse. Let's just give it some leeway. Verse 21. Very literal. And strike animal, he makes peace us, and strike mankind, he dies. So, umaket, that's the word for strike. It's never used in its root form, which would be like to punch somebody, to hit them with something. They're struck in some way, maybe you hit them with your car, that word could be used for any of those type of things. Again, this one is in hofal, it's the passive of vaYiqra. We've already had this word. So this really of the idea of you killed somebody. If in fact, Jusinius is right about this being hofal or hefil, it is literally in the root with the vav added to it. So I'm not sure where they get that idea, but that's what he said. Then we have behema, animal. Yeah, see, I think I said livestock. Remember, I wasn't comfortable with that. Animal's a better word. They use beast usually in the Bible, but it's an animal. So it can be a cow, a sheep, whatever. Hopefully, if you're Jewish, it's not a pig. It's not against God's law for you to raise a pig, but generally speaking, if you're raising pig, you're only a generation away from your kids eating pig. You know what I'm saying? Just throwing that out there. Then we have shalamena. Remember that from shalom? It's the words, are you going to make peace? Well, remember what you do? You're paying the price. Umakeh. So striking back here, Adam, which is mankind. Adam is not the name of the first man. It's the Hebrew word that means mankind, as in human. That's what that word actually means. It was way back in Bereshit, in the first, as the world knows it today, the first book of Moshe, first book in the Hebrew Bible. That wasn't about one man and one woman, because that human would have had a name, and that female human would have had a name, but they had titles, not names. Just gonna throw that out there for you guys to mull around in your brains. So this is against the mankind or whatever it is, Yumat, he dies. And he flat out die. And remember, in Hebrew, we don't generally, if we said mot yumat previously, now within the same context, because the subject has not changed, and it will not until we get to the end of the chapter. So we don't say the word twice here. We just say yumat, which indicates die he die. It's the same exact thing. We just don't say it twice. There's just no reason to, so we don't. So thus, killing an animal, he will pay for it. He'll make peace. But killing a human, well, either he is to be put to death or he is to be driven out from his people, his nation, his God. Bye-bye. So our next verse in 22 says, judgment one he will be to you. Let's say as an outsider, as a native, he will be, well, native is the next word. He will be for, as it is for the outsider, as it is for the outsider, so will it be for the native, right? God says, for I am Yahweh God. I am Yahweh your God, right? So we have mishpat. Well, what are the mishpat? Well, that's judgments according to the Torah, used of the act of judging, of the place of judgment. It's of judges sitting on a throne, or judges sitting on the bench, rather, or a king sitting on a throne, meting out his judgment. So mishpat. Maybe we're Jewish and call it the 613 laws. Just throwing that out there. Then echad. So that's the word for one. Depending on how that same word is used, sometimes it means first. Like if it's used for when it says on the one day of the month, we translate that on the first day of the month. Then it's yiyeh, which is it will be, it will come to pass, it will exist, something's going to happen. Then it says lachem, to you. Then it says kakir. So we have a word that is not well defined. They'll translate it as a sojourner, which in the time of the translating into English, that's basically something a word they had to just grab and throw in there because they didn't know what to use in place of kakir. So sometimes they said sojourner, which gives you the idea of someone who's maybe passing through. And then it would say foreigner in other places for this same word, call the person a foreigner, because it's of the idea of somebody not of the same nationality. And then as time went on, eventually they'd say someone who's not a citizen. There were no citizens back then. You didn't have citizen papers. There was nothing that said you belonged to this nation or that nation. You identified with your family tribe. Anyway, so this is that's not, calling somebody a foreigner is kind of a little out there, especially since they're all from the Middle East. How do you have a foreigner? Anyway, so sojourner, I think, was the more common word that they use. But again, that gives you that idea of somebody just passing through. But at the same time, if they're dwelling where you dwell, don't they kind of live there too? So it's hard to say what that means. I've been connecting that to proselytos or proselyte for some time. And after what I've done this week, I think I might back off on that and put that to a different word instead of this word. But we'll talk about that when we get into our next chapter for sure. So then we have ka as rach. So as Rach is native, so the putting the ka sound at the beginning of it makes it as native. So we have it as somebody who's not native, so shall it be for the native, right? Because that's what really was just said. Yeah, it will be. And then it says, Ki ani Yahweh Elohechem. So, for I am Yahweh, your God. Not a lot to talk about on this one. It's real straightforward. My translation, there will be one, remember echad, one could be one or first. There will be one judgment for you, as it is to the ger. That was your word for, remember I was talking about proselyte or outsider or something like that. One for the outsider, let's just call him that for now. So it will be for the native. I am Yahweh, your God. The problem I have with using the word native is these people are not from Israel. None of them. They've never been there before. They're not there now. How are they going to call themselves native? Right? And then you get the whole idea of, oh, well, they're all Jews. No, they weren't. I mean, you got to stop and think about this. Abraham was not a Jew. He was from Ur, Ur, right? That's in Mesopotamia. That makes him a Chaldean, as we call it in America today. Hasdai. He's not a Jew. When he leaves his hometown, he's already married to a woman from that same place. Now, whether it's in the same town or not, we don't know, but we do know she's from Mesopotamia, just like he is. So you have two Chaldeans. I'm going to use that word. They leave, they go off on their little journey, or well, kind of a big one, and they have a son. Well, that son is the son of two Chaldeans. His mom and his dad both are Chaldeans, so he's pretty much 100% Chaldean, right? And then when he comes of marrying age, Abraham sends his servant back to Mesopotamia to find his Chaldean son, a Chaldean wife, which happens. Rachel, as she's known. And so now you've got 4 Chaldeans, and Abraham did this again and again. Everybody in there, all the way down to the 12 tribes of Israel, every last one of those people were 100% Chaldean blood. There is no such thing as Judaism in this time period. None. They're not called Jews. Abraham is at one point called Eber, which is where we get the word Hebrew. But that's as close as you get to anything Jewish. And, we kind of took it from that and turned it into something Jewish because it sure wasn't Jewish back then, right? So talking about, hey, they were Jews. No, these were Chaldeans. And then after you get all these Chaldeans, well, the things start breaking down. Moshe goes into Egypt to lead all the people out. And the first thing he says is, oh, by the way, there's a mixed multitude. In other words, there's people from every nation under the sun. We've just recently read a story about a man who was half Egyptian, half Jew, right? His dad was Egyptian. His mother was a Jew. They're not exactly of that same bloodline. It's kind of mixing it down, right? Then Moshe goes off and marries a woman from Cush. Hello, that Hebrew word means black. And that particular town is from the place where black people lived. His wife was black. He was not. He's from the line of Chaldeans. They're not black. And on and on. What about Ruth? She's from Moab. She's not Jewish, but she becomes part of the Jewish family, right? Because she converts to Judaism. Oh, there's the thing. Abraham. He converted from living the way, he wanted to live, what seemed right in his own eyes, to obeying God. That was counted to him as righteousness. Righteousness, according to the Bible, is only said of those who obey God's law. God's law had not been given to Abraham, but he did everything God asked him to do, and because he obeyed God, he got something before it's time. I'm going to throw that out there as a possibility. So we're getting to 23, which that's the last one? Yes. Okay. Ooh, it's a long one. So in English, and he spoke Moshe to children Yisrael, and he make go they, so he brought them, that from marginalized to from outside to camp, and he stoned they with he stone, and children Yisrael made they as that commanded Yahweh Moshe. That's kind of a hard one, right? It's not too bad. vaYiqra. So, and he spoke, quite literally, va and he daber, spoke, and he spoke. Moshe, so, and Moshe spoke. Then it says, El bene Yisrael. So, and Moshe spoke to the children of Yisrael, the children of Israel. Oh, smacker, I did it again. Sorry, I keep getting all this wild code stuff on here. So he spoke to them, and it says, vaYiqra. Well, this is where you get the word for go, but it's intensified. So he made them go. So he brought them out, or he, it's to bring. It basically, you take somebody by the hand and pull them. That's the idea you should get from this, because that's literally how God's describing it. I took them by the hand and drug them out of there. All right. And then it says, et ha mekalel. Oh, so this is bringing the one who marginalized. Do we remember what that was? What do you know? You're just a woman. Who do you think you are? May the fleas of 1,000 camels invade your armpits. Shut up, old woman. No one asked your opinion. And again, I made those up because the man's talking to his mother, right? And we don't know what he said, but I'm just throwing some nutty stuff in there. So the guy who marginalized, it says El Michutz. So they grabbed him by the hand and drug him outside. Michutz, from outside, is how we say it in Hebrew. In English, we'd say probably just outside, or maybe to the outside. La Machane, the camp. It's really to camp, if you think about it. But they drug him outside of the camp. Is this starting to sound familiar from the story we started with, from what God did? Drove him outside of the garden, the camp, the place where the people lived and God lived. Now, these people are taking this man who committed this crime against his God. Well, the God of his mother, at least. I'm not so sure you could say it's his God, should have been, but apparently he didn't worry too much about that. So they're doing the same thing to this man that God did to Adam and Chava. The exact same thing. They're dragging him out of that place. Remember, it said God drove them out. vaYiqra, and they stoned that boy. They picked up rocks and just beat him with them, right? Oto Aven with stones. They stoned him with stones. And it's funny, it doesn't say that he died or until he died. Just says stone him with stones. Then it says Uvene and children, or we would say the children, Yisrael, and the children of Israel, Asu. They did. It's more like did they, but we would say they did. I wonder what they did. Ziva. That's a command. So when God told them what to do, they understood that it was a command. The command Yahweh. So we would say the command of Yahweh, right? Yahweh et Moshe. So the command that Yahweh gave to Moshe. So here's our translation. And Moshe spoke to the children of Israel, and they brought he who marginalized outside the camp and chiseled his name and offenses in stone and excommunicated him. Thus the children of Israel did that which Yahweh commanded Moshe. They didn't take him out and pick up rocks and stone him. They chiseled his name and his offense in stone. Where we get, I believe that's where the whole idea of the scarlet letter eventually comes from, that, I guess it was the Puritans used to do, which is a horrible thing to do to somebody, because at least if you're just getting your name chiseled in stone, you can, travel to some other place where your name's not chiseled in stone and make a life for yourself. But you are forced to wear a scarlet letter. Doesn't matter where you live, does it? Leave it up to the religious to make things much worse than they should be. So the idea that you're actually supposed to poke somebody's eye out all the way up till now and beyond, I still don't buy it. Because if God is not going to kill the group of people who ruined it for everyone else, who drove mankind out of the presence of God, that's the death. That is the ultimate death, is to be separated from our God. From that kind of separation, nations go to war. Nations fall. Good people die because of these wars and the fall of these nations. The children of Israel wind up enslaved. They wind up in Holocaust after Holocaust after Holocaust. And if you don't know what I mean by that, go watch my videos on the Maccabees. I think it's the third one. Actually, I don't know which one, but one of them I go through one Holocaust after the other. Most people think that there's only one. No, there are hundreds and hundreds of them. Hundreds and hundreds of times when people tried to wipe our people out. Were it not for the covenant between God and his people, there wouldn't be one of us left. So I don't buy it. I don't believe it. But I do know at some point that it is going to get to that place. But none of these offenses rise to that level. We're going to find out soon enough, not in the next chapter. I think it's the last chapter of the book of Leviticus where we finally find that out. But these are not the type of offenses that anybody is supposed to be stoned to death or killed in any way beyond being driven out from your God, your people, your nation, your hometown. You don't get to be around any of them ever again. That is, biblically speaking, ultimate death. Shalom v'shalom.
The blessing, vaYiqra. Yavarecha Yahweh v'yish merecha. Ya'er Yahweh panai v'lecha v'hunecha. Yisa Yahweh panai v'lecha v'yasim lecha shalom. And in English, may Yahweh cause you to lie down so that you may rest. May he touch and caress you. May he prepare you for what is ahead. May he watch over you. May he keep you from harm. May he cause goodness to grow in you and take away the bad. May he arrange your life and cause you to flourish. May he cheer you up and gladden your heart. May he cause his light to shine through you. May he show you tenderness, favor, and love in his presence. May he show you kindness and be delicate towards you. May he show you his generosity, mercy, compassion, and desire for you as it comes forth from the depths of his soul. May he lift you out of your pit and deliver you from the things that hold you prisoner. May he draw you to his chest and cast his eyes on yours. May he show you his love and desire for you as he cradles you in his arms. May he bear your punishment and pardon you of your sin. May he take you for his bride. May he establish a foundation in you. May he place his name on your heart and mind and make your body his temple. May you be his treasure. May you always be on his mind. May he draw you near and comfort you when you are afraid. May he assure you there is nothing to fear because he is with you. May you and all that concerns you be at peace because he is your friend. Amen.